Hey, folks. This is going to be me attempting to record a story that I've told a few different times throughout my life. This is going to be an unscripted take, um, and as a result, there'll probably be a lot of pausing and such. But I grew up in a small town in northeastern Oklahoma called Nowata, and it's county seat, but it just barely a county seat. It's on the border of Kansas, and the a large chunk of the land to the east of town is in the river bottoms of the Verdigris River, which eventually spills out into the Mississippi River. And there's like a navigational channel that utilizes part of the Verdigris and the Arkansas and all that stuff. So this is a story of me seeing what I have always thought of as a Bigfoot. So this tale began for me would have been April 1986, and I've said this a couple times, and I've tried to find firm anchors, and best as I can tell, it was April of 1986 because dates kind of get squishy in my brain because I'm not a super detail oriented person. But I had a good friend at the time, and he had recently moved into this really large house that had like a lot of land associated with it. And the northern half or the northern end of the property bordered a creek that eventually spills into the Verdigris River. So it's like a lot of, wetland area down by the creek. And, there's a good stand of trees. And we were all in Boy Scouts, and that property kind of unofficially became the place that we set up for camps. So they had built a semi-permanent fire circle area up on the northwest corner of that property. And I'm sure it doesn't look anything like it did at the time, but in my memory, there was an opening in the trees, and we had set up a permanent fire ring, and we had, built a trail through the woods there, and had dug a latrine pit and put like a log lean-to kind of thing over it that you could use as a toilet seat. Real primitive, but it was at least a bathroom that you could go to. So we did a lot of scouting there. But I remember this particular occasion was a birthday celebration for my friend that owned the property. And there were a bunch of us that were spending the night. We're going to go camping out at this, structure. And how the little clearing worked is they'd basically park all the vehicles, in a line, on the southern edge of this clearing, and then in the center would be this fire ring, and then the tents tended to get set up in an arc, kind of between where the trucks were and where the fire ring is, so that the openings of the tents often faced the fire ring. And then to the west side, there was a barbed wire fence, and that was basically the edge of the property. So I was staying with a good friend named Ryan, who's unfortunately long since passed. He passed sometime when I was in college. I don't know the particulars of it, but nobody called him Ryan. We're Gen X kids of the greatest era of movies, and as a result, we called him Slimer because his last name was Green. And it just stuck. So everybody called him Slimer. So it was me and Slimer sitting in this tent, and it's what we call the pump tent, but it's basically just like a, like column of tent that, is kind of low to the ground. And I'll put a picture of it here. if I turn this into a video like I think I'm going to turn it into. But basically, the front was opening towards the fire circle, and we were both there on sleeping bags with the head of our sleeping bag facing the opening to the tent. And I don't know at what point we went to sleep, because you tend to stay up fairly late when you do these camping things. But I remember Ryan waking me up, and he nudged me and he told me to be quiet, and he wanted me to look out towards the latrine. So at the head of the trail where the latrine path is, the adults would always hang a Coleman lantern up on a stick up in the tree. And the stick was, I don't know how tall it was, because I was a little bitty kid at that point. But it was tall. Like, it was 11, 12 foot into the tree. And they basically had a stick that they would take the bail of the Coleman lantern and place it on that, and then place it on top of the like stick that's jutting out of this tree. And that was what was used to light the entrance to the trail in case anybody needed to go to the bathroom at night. To the best of my knowledge, none of us actually ever went and used that latrine. I don't even remember ever using the latrine. Like, I think we mostly just held it in until we went home. Like, peeing is no problem. You go, find some bushes, and everybody likes to pee in nature, but nobody likes to shit in a hole in the ground. So again, I don't know if the adults ever used the latrine, but whatever the case, there was a lantern hanging up in a tree at the entrance to this trailhead. And I say a trailhead, it was just like a little bitty trail through the woods. But anyway, so Ryan motions towards the far edge of the clearing, the north edge of the clearing where this trail's at and where this lantern's at. And there's a figure batting the lantern and like standing kind of on its tippy toes, batting the lantern with the top of its hand. And it's like barely touching it, but it's able to touch it, and the light is swinging slightly. And the longer we look at it, the more I can tell this is not a human. This isn't an adult messing with the lantern. This is something else. And like, we're only seeing this washed out as a shadow by this lantern light, but you can tell it's a brownish black figure, and it looks hairy because like the arm looks like it has fur hanging off of it. And whatever it was, I can only describe as lanky. Like, it's real skinny, spindly legs and spindly arms. Like, it's not, a lot of Sasquatch sightings talk about it being like this hulking, like gorilla-like creature. But like, this was really like, this was, basketball player lanky, like, Wilt Chamberlain style lanky, really long legs, really long arms. It would look like if the arm was dropped to their waist, it looks like the arm would hang down past their knee. So they're sitting there batting at the lantern, and the next bit happens really suddenly. And I've replayed it in my head a million times, trying to figure out what triggered the next sequence of events. But essentially, the best guess that I can do is that one of us made a noise. And I don't remember making a noise. I don't remember Brian making a noise, but all I can think is that we made some noise because the figure stops and turns and looks at the tent. And because of the angle of everything, like, I've heard people talking about eye shine, and I don't remember eye shine or anything like that because, there obviously weren't lights. The light was in the opposite direction of where we were. But I can clearly see in my head the figure turning and dropping its arm and staring at our tent. And then next thing I know, it is rushing towards our tent, and we're sitting there petrified. And I don't know what to do at this point. And I'm just trying to be as still as possible. Like, it's going to not notice me or something like that, because obviously it's rushing towards the tent. And once it clears the fire ring, it turns and runs to the west towards the fence line and looks in at the tent. And at that point I can see that it's more brownish fur, but I can't make out a lot of details because the lighting situation is still mostly shadow. But I watch as it vaults over a fence. If you've ever seen a deer or something just leap over the fence like it doesn't even exist. That's what it was like. They just leaped over the fence like it was no big deal and landed on the other side and then headed for a tree line on the other side of the fence and disappeared into the tree line. And obviously at this point, we're not going to get any more sleep, or at least not for a while. And Ryan and I are sitting there talking about whether or not we both saw what we thought we saw. And mostly neither of us got a really good look at facial features or anything like that. It was just tall humanoid that very clearly had hair. You could see edges of hair. It wasn't smooth skin type scenario. And I think at some point we did eventually fall asleep, and didn't really want to talk to anybody else about it because we thought they would think we were crazy. And occasionally Ryan and I, in later years of scouting, we'd talk about it, but we'd only really talk about it when nobody was around. So that situation happened, like I said. It would have been April of 1986 when this birthday party happened. And then the next day, we got up, fixed breakfast, and we're running around in the river bottoms. And neither Ryan or I really wanted to do that after experiencing what we had experienced the night before. But over time, enough distance had been happened between the nights, and you start to question what you actually saw, and maybe it was nothing much, or I don't know, maybe we were dreaming, maybe. So we got caught up into the fun of running around with a bunch of kids down in the river bottoms. And eventually we started playing hide and go seek, and somehow Ryan and I ended up on the same team. And, for the first couple times we were hunting down the other people, and then we had to go hide. And Ryan was wearing a tan members only jacket. And I remember we took the jacket and we hung it on a tree, and then we went and hid somewhere else. And, they eventually saw the jacket and came down there, and then saw we weren't there. And by then we had doubled back around behind them. And eventually they found us. But the members only jacket is important only because it was starting to get late in the day, and I don't know, probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon at that point, after running around all day long. And we were going to head back up to the house, and eventually everybody's folks were going to come and retrieve us. So I remember that Ryan we left Ryan's jacket on the tree. So the two of us went down there to retrieve it. And it was hanging on a tree, that was just off the banks of this creek that was down there. And I remember after Ryan picked up the jacket and he headed off, and I was standing there for a couple seconds, and I hear this rustling noise on the other bank of this creek. And I turn around just soon enough to see some figure that's very tall moving through the brush in the opposite direction away from us. So I'm thinking whatever we saw the night before had basically been trailing us all day when we were down there messing around in the river bottoms. And I just happened to catch the motion and the sound of it moving away from us as we were obviously moving away from it. So that happened, and I didn't really talk about it other than to Ryan, but I eventually told my dad. And this is some time later. And he tells me a story that when this would have been the year before I was born, so in 1975, there was a Bigfoot sighting in the town of Noxie, Oklahoma, which is also in the same county as Nowata. And it said the event was September of 1975. And my dad was a professional photographer on the side, and he would shoot, Little League groups, and he would shoot weddings and things like that. And his cousin John ultimately went off and became a newspaper man and, did photojournalism and stuff. Ran a paper out of Catoosa for a while. But he and John got it in their heads that they were going to go find photographic proof of a Bigfoot, because they were referring to this thing as the Noxie monster. And I'll put links in the bio to some articles. But anyway, so this happened in 1975, and they actually talked to, I think the farmer's last name was Tosh, and they went up and talked to him and spent, a couple days on his property roaming around. And, the farmer, basically told them about the situation. And they roamed around through the brush looking for signs of anything to take photos, and never really found anything. And they thought nothing of it. The only thing that had really happened is that the farmer had apparently shot his dog one night thinking that the monster had come back. And he was, frustrated and sad about that. But, anyway, so my dad and his cousin ran around for a while and had this great adventure looking for Bigfoot. But the thing is like Noxie's not really far from where this sighting I had was. And realistically, there's enough lowland and forested areas that something could cross the entire way without really being seen. But anyway, so that's the Noxie situation. The sighting I had was, to the east of Nowata proper. But so we scanned forward. This would have been 1995. I was dating a girl that I'd met online who was going to Pitt State in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And that didn't last for very long, but there were a couple times that I made trips to Pittsburgh, Kansas. And basically the route that was the easiest was go up 169, past Cherryvale, and then take 400 through Parsons and into Pittsburgh. And that was basically the route that I would take. And this was pretty late at night, and I had stayed there at her apartment way longer than I should have. This was, I don't know, it would have been well after midnight by the time I left Pittsburgh, Kansas. So I don't know at what time in the morning it was. I'm guessing it was getting close to 1, or probably is a little bit after 1, when I turned on I was just about to the turn for 169, and I was driving through some low-lying areas, and there's a little creek-like thing there along there. And right in front of my car, I saw something giant and humanoid jump across the road. And again, I didn't get a lot of detail. This was a darker brown or black, very hairy. This one was way more muscular. And it just leapt across the road and then continued on down the other side. And I kept driving. And there was a little convenience store up, I don't know, 10 minutes up the road. And I pulled off there to kind of calm down and get something to drink. And I was kind of shook up. So much so that, like, I remember paying with a 20 and they gave me back some change that should have been a $10 bill and miscellaneous singles. But when I got home, they had given me $100 bill and some ones. And at the time, I would have noticed that. And, you know, so I'm sure somebody got in trouble over that. But I mean, clearly I don't know if it was that I was flustered looking and I made the clerk flustered. But anyway, so I call my folks and tell them that I'm on my way home. Just so that they don't worry. Cause this is in the pre-cell phone era when nobody had cell phones. So yeah, I mean, so I saw something else up there. And again, that's not too far from the general area that all this has happened. And then, you know, looking into the Noxie monster, sighting in Noxie, Oklahoma, apparently roughly a year before that, there was a sighting at Watova, and Watova is just down 169 from Nowata. It's the town you drive through right before you get to Nowata on the way from, you know, Tulsa to Nowata. So there's clearly a history of sightings in this region. And I've always wondered, like, I had a falling out with the friend who owned the property. We were both in Order the Arrow, which is a service organization tied to Boy Scouts. And there was one weekend when I got super sick, and I lived my life as a sick kid. Like, I don't have a normal immune system. So if something was going around, I caught it. And I was supposed to go with this friend to an Order the Arrow event. And I had to cancel the last minute because I was wheezing too bad to go out into the sticks with an asthma attack. And my friend fell asleep while driving home after the event, and you know, wrecked his truck, which was, he was real proud of his short bed truck. And from that point forward, he blamed me for him having that wreck. And he was beat up pretty bad from it, spent some time in the hospital. But like, his thing was that if I had not canceled and I had not called out sick, he wouldn't have had the wreck because I would have been there to keep him awake. So from that point forward, we just didn't really talk much. But I've always wondered if he or his family ever saw anything, because I never told him, and I don't know that Ryan ever told him what had happened on his property. And like, there's times I think about driving up and, you know, seeing who owns the property now and asking them if they ever see anything there. Cause like, I'm 100% convinced I saw a Bigfoot when we were camping there in 86. And I'm pretty sure I had another sighting, up near Parsons, Kansas, in 1995. So I don't know. Like, I mean, I've not had any more sightings other than those, technically 3, the night of, you know, when we were camping, and then the day we were running around in the river bottoms. And then also, you know, that brief, jumped across the road in front of me, up near Parsons, Kansas. But anyway, that is my Bigfoot story. I've told it a couple times. I always feel like when I write it down, I never do it justice. So I thought I would record myself talking through it, and maybe it would make some modicum of sense now. Anyway, this is unlike the rest of the videos that I record, and I don't know what will come of this. But anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.